Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. I left work early that afternoon, something I almost never did. After weeks of feeling Amy pulling away, I thought maybe surprising her would bring us back to the place we used to be. I had her favorite flowers in the passenger seat and 2 tickets folded in my pocket. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a small jazz set at the same hotel where we'd celebrated our first anniversary. On my way home, I drove past a coffee shop Amy liked. She used to stop there after work, though lately she claimed she was too busy. Out of habit, I slowed at the light. Through the glass, I saw her. Amy sat at a corner table, facing a man I didn't recognize. He was sharp-looking, dark blazer. His name, I'd later learn, was Neil Harper. At that moment, all I saw was how close she leaned toward him, how her hand rested lightly on his wrist. I pulled the car into the nearest spot and just sat there. I told myself it could be innocent, a client meeting, an old friend. But the longer I watched, the harder it was to pretend. The intimacy was obvious. I walked inside, the flowers still in my hand, though they felt like a joke now. Neither of them noticed me until I stopped right at their table. Amy's smile fell instantly. Neil glanced up with the kind of calm that made my blood run cold. "Justin," she started, pulling her hand back, as if that erased what I'd seen. I didn't answer. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the folded paper, and placed it on the edge of the table. The words were simple. "Don't come home." Her face went pale. Neil leaned back, unreadable. I set the flowers on the table, turned, and walked out without another word. By the time I reached my car, my hands were locked on the wheel tightly. I didn't shout. I just sat there, staring straight ahead, knowing nothing about my marriage was what I thought it was. Despite the note, Amy came home that night as if nothing had happened. The sound of her keys in the door made my chest tighten. I stayed on the couch, the TV dark, waiting. She walked in, heels clicking against the hardwood, her face calm, even practiced. She set her purse on the chair and looked at me. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady. I didn't move. "Go ahead." Amy crossed the room and sat on the edge of the couch, too close for someone who'd just been caught. "Justin, it's not what you think. That man today, he's a client. We were discussing work." I turned my head slowly toward her. "Do you hold hands with all your clients?" Her jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. "You're misreading it. We've been under pressure with this project." I was just comforting him. It looked worse than it was. I let out a short, humorless laugh. "You call that comforting? Amy, you were leaning across the table like you were on a date." Her voice softened, almost rehearsed. "I've been under a lot of stress. You've noticed. I just needed someone to listen." I stood and paced the room, forcing my voice to stay level. "If you needed someone to listen, I was right here. 10 years of marriage, Amy? And you chose him?" She rose, her tone shifting sharper. "You're overreacting. Nothing happened. You're blowing this out of proportion." I stopped, facing her. "Don't insult me." I saw the way you looked at him. That wasn't business. That was personal. For a moment, her mask cracked. I saw the guilt flicker in her eyes before she forced it down. "It's not physical," she said quietly. "It's complicated." I held her gaze, calm but unyielding. "Here's what's not complicated. You're not sleeping in this house tonight. Tomorrow you tell me everything. No half-truths, no rehearsed lines. If you can't, don't bother coming back." Her lips parted as if to argue, but I didn't give her the chance. I walked past her, up the stairs, and closed the bedroom door behind me. She never said where she went. A hotel? A friend's couch? His apartment? It didn't matter. The fact that she stayed away was enough. I didn't sleep much that night. The house felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. Around 2 in the morning, I heard a soft scrape by the front door. When I went down, someone had slid a thick envelope under the door. My name was written on it in block letters. I carried it to the kitchen and opened it. Inside were screenshots, dozens of them. Texts between Amy and the man from the coffee shop. His name was right there in the thread. Neil Harper. The messages weren't just friendly. They were private, intimate, filled with late-night plans and inside jokes. Several of them ended with hotel addresses. I spread the papers across the table, one by one. Receipts from a boutique hotel across town. calendar invites for client dinners that matched the same nights she told me she was working late. Each page chipped away at whatever doubt I had left. At the bottom of the pile was a sticky note, written in quick handwriting. "You don't know me. I'm tired of covering for her. V." I stared at it, reading the letter over and over. Someone close to Amy wanted me to know the truth. Someone who had been protecting her until now. The evidence laid out in front of me didn't just suggest a mistake. It mapped out a pattern, almost a schedule. 9 months of lies, carefully hidden behind client meetings and project stress. By dawn, I was still at the kitchen table, everything spread out like pieces of a crime scene. There was no anger left, just clarity. Amy had told me the night before that it was complicated. Now I knew what complicated meant: hotels, texts, and lies. I didn't know who V was yet, but I intended to find out. The sticky note stayed on my desk all morning. I kept staring at the letter V, wondering who would risk sending me something like that. By noon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You got the envelope. Meet me at the plaza across from City Hall at 3 p.m. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity won. At exactly 3, I stood under the glass awning of the plaza. A woman in a gray coat approached, mid-30s, carrying a leather folder. "You must be Justin," she said, her voice steady. "I'm Vera." I nodded. "You sent the envelope." She gave a small, humorless smile. "I did. Amy won't tell you the truth. I thought you should have it." We sat on a bench away from the crowd. She opened the folder and pulled out more documents, copies of internal emails, client notes, even a personal message Amy had sent from her private account to Neil. "She's been using work as her cover," Vera said. "Neil is a senior executive with one of our clients. They've been meeting under the pretense of project reviews. I covered for her more than once. I shouldn't have, but she pressured me." I flipped through the pages. The dates lined up perfectly with Amy's so-called late nights. "How long?" I asked. "Almost a year," Vera replied. "I caught them once at a hotel bar after an office event." She laughed in my face when I confronted her, said it was none of my business. I clenched my jaw but stayed composed. "Why tell me now?" Her expression hardened. "Because she pushed me off the project last week. Said she needed someone she could trust. I realized I was just her shield. I won't be that anymore." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "The man's name is Neil Harper. He's married. His wife's name is Catherine Morgan. She deserves to know too." I closed the folder and looked her in the eye. "Thank you, Vera. You've given me what I needed." For the first time since this started, the fog lifted. Amy's lies weren't speculation anymore. They were documented. And now I had names. Amy came by the next evening to collect some clothes. She moved quickly, like she wanted to be in and out before I said a word. But I was ready. On the dining table, I had spread the folder Vera had given me, texts, receipts, emails, all in neat rows. When Amy walked in and saw the papers, she froze. "What is this?" "Your life outside this house," I said calmly. She set her bag down and tried to keep her voice steady. "Justin, it's not what it looks like." I cut her off. Don't insult me again. I have the hotel receipts. I have the messages. I even have the emails you sent from your personal account. Do you want me to read them out loud?" Her lips parted, then closed again. She looked at the papers, then at me. For a moment, she seemed ready to deny everything, but the evidence left her nowhere to run. "Yes," she said finally, her tone defensive. "I've been seeing Neil, but it's not like you think. It wasn't serious." I leaned back in the chair, studying her. 9 months? Hotels? Messages at 2 in the morning? That looks serious enough. She folded her arms, as if that gave her ground to stand on. "It was emotional. I was unhappy, Justin. He understood me in ways you didn't anymore." I kept my voice calm, deliberate. "You could have talked to me. Instead, you lied. You built an entire second life, and you expected me never to notice." Amy's eyes filled with frustration. "I didn't plan for it to happen. It just did." I pulled out my phone, pressed record, and set it on the table. "Say it again. Say you were seeing him." She glared at me. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you'll spin this any way you can later." Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "Fine. I was seeing him. Are you satisfied?" I picked up the phone, stopped the recording, and slipped it into my pocket. Satisfied? No, but it's enough. You made your choice, Amy. Now you live with it. She grabbed her bag and stormed out, leaving the papers untouched on the table. I didn't wait long before reaching out to Neil's wife. Vera had given me her name, Catherine Morgan, and after some searching I found her email. I kept it simple, attaching a few screenshots with a message. I think you deserve to know. If you'd like to talk, I'll meet you anywhere you choose. She replied the next day with a time and place, a cafe on the edge of town. When I arrived, she was already seated, her posture straight, her expression tight but composed. "Justin?" she asked as I approached. "Yes." I sat across from her and slid the folder onto the table. "I'm sorry you're seeing this from me, but I figured you'd rather know the truth than stay in the dark." She opened the folder, flipping through the pages slowly. The texts, the hotel receipts, the emails. Her face barely changed, but I saw the slight tremor in her hands. "I suspected something," she admitted quietly. "The late meetings, the excuses. But I didn't think it was with her." I nodded once. I didn't think it was with anyone until I saw them at the coffee shop. We sat in silence for a moment. Finally, she closed the folder and looked up. "I'll confront him tonight. But I also intend to escalate this at work. His firm has strict policies about relationships with clients. If she was involved professionally, they'll both have to answer for it." "That's your call," I said. "I won't stand in your way." That evening, Catherine followed through. Neil came home to find her waiting with the evidence spread across their kitchen table. I know because she called me afterward. "He tried to deny it at first," she said, her voice steady but sharp. "But the dates, the receipts, the emails, it crushed his story. He had nothing left to say." Later that night, Amy stormed into my house, her face red with anger. "You dragged work into this?" she snapped. "You had no right." I stayed seated, calm. "You mixed work with us the day you used it as cover." I just let the truth catch up. Her glare held for a moment, then faltered. Without another word, she turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. The fallout came fast. Within a week, Neil was suspended from his firm while an internal review started. Amy was removed from her projects and quietly sidelined while her company investigated. Their carefully hidden relationship was now out in the open, not just between us, but in boardrooms and HR offices. Friends began calling, messages lighting up my phone. Some wanted to check in, others wanted the gossip. A few accused me of being vindictive. One evening, a mutual friend named Claire rang. Her tone carried judgment before she even got to her point. "Justin, I heard what happened. People are saying you went too far, sending things to their companies." I kept my voice steady. "Claire, Amy cheated on me for almost a year, with a married man, using work as her shield. If you call telling the truth too far, then that says more about you than me." She hesitated, then sighed. I don't know. It's messy." "It's messy because Amy made it that way," I said flatly. "Don't forget that." I ended the call before she could reply. Amy, for her part, tried to play both angles. She left voicemails, half angry, half pleading. "You've made your point. Stop this. We can fix it." The tone swung between defiance and desperation, but I didn't answer. There was nothing left to fix. When she finally suggested a quiet separation, I listened without emotion. "If you want that," I told her, "then it comes with conditions." She frowned. "What conditions?" "Financial clarity, division spelled out clean, and your written admission of misconduct for the dissolution filing. Otherwise, I'll let the firms take their full course. Your choice." For the first time, she didn't argue. She just stared at me, realization dawning that the leverage she once had was gone. By then, Catherine's attorney had already looped me into her strategy. Our stories aligned, our timelines matched, and together, we had made sure Amy and Neil's actions couldn't be buried. For the first time since the coffee shop, I felt the balance of power shift back into my hands. By the end of the month, the fallout was complete. Both of them had lost the very careers they'd used as their cover. Our divorce paperwork moved cleanly. The written admission I'd demanded sat signed in the file. There were no shouting matches, no drawn-out negotiations, just facts on paper and signatures at the bottom. I turned my attention back to the house. I stripped away every trace of Amy's presence, her framed prints, her throw pillows, the little pieces she had scattered through the rooms. I replaced them with my own choices, simple and spare. It wasn't about redecorating. It was about reclaiming space. Amy moved into a small apartment across town, one she rented through a friend. It was temporary, she said, but I didn't care. Her future wasn't my concern anymore. One evening, I found an old photo from our wedding day at the back of a drawer. For a moment, I stared at the younger faces, at how certain I had been. I didn't feel rage anymore, not even sadness, just acceptance. She had made her choices. I had made mine. Catherine and I stayed in touch, not as allies bound by revenge, but as two people who had walked through the same fire. We met for coffee once in a while, talking more about our own plans than the wreckage left behind. On one of those mornings, she said something that stuck. "Don't let them define the rest of your life, Justin. This is a chapter, not the whole book." She was right. Weeks later, I returned to the same coffee shop where it all began. I sat alone at a corner table, ordered a black coffee. The story had started here, and now it ended here too. On my terms, calm, steady, and in control. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Thank you for watching. Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. It started with silence. Our apartment wasn't built for it. The walls usually carried the hum of Christine moving around, or at least the buzz of her late-night TV. But when I walked in that night, nothing. No door unlocking, no heels on the hardwood. I noticed three things right away. The hallway light was still burning from when she left, like a stage waiting for its actor. Her silk scarf, navy, the one she wore when she wanted to look sharp, was draped carelessly over the arm of a chair, and her pearl earrings were sitting in the freezer tray on top of the ice, as if cooling them off could erase where they'd been. That told me she had come back, at least for a few minutes. Christine always dropped things in odd places when she was restless. She must have stepped inside after dinner, paced the room, then gone out again. The door log confirmed it. She'd swiped in close to midnight, stayed less than half an hour, and left without returning. Christine had told me that morning, "I might stop by Adrian's party tonight. He's launching that book, remember?" She said it like it was nothing. Just a polite gesture, a professional courtesy. But she knew exactly what she was doing. Adrian Cole wasn't just some author. He was her ex, the one she swore was ancient history. At 2 in the morning, I opened our toll app. A ping at 1:27 a.m. showed her car heading toward the waterfront hotels. No return log after that. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at those earrings resting on ice like evidence in a case file. I wasn't going to wait for explanations or excuses. I wasn't going to play the fool in my own home. So I wrote a note. 4 words, nothing more. "I won't stay here." Then I packed a duffel, my laptop, a week's worth of clothes, and the important files from the desk drawer. No drama, no raised voice. By the time the sun pushed through the blinds, my side of the closet was empty. I'd hauled everything down the stairs in 3 quiet trips, the duffel in one hand, boxes balanced in the other. I didn't take it to a friend's place. I wasn't interested in explaining myself or inviting advice. Instead, I drove to a storage unit I'd reserved online at 3 in the morning. I paid for 6 months up front, slid my belongings into the metal cube, and closed the lock. Clean. Final. From there, I headed to the suite my co-worker Malcolm Voss had tipped me off about, a corporate rental on the edge of downtown. No questions asked, month to month, utilities folded into the bill. By 8, I had a key card in hand and a neutral room that didn't smell like her perfume. The rest of the morning was pure housekeeping. I froze the joint credit card. I redirected my paycheck into a new account. I set up a P.O. box across town, and I sent an email to our landlord asking to be taken off the lease as soon as legally possible. My name was no longer tied to her address. It was nearly 10 when Christine finally came home. I watched it happen on the door app. Unlock at 10:02, door shut at 10:03. She had a paper bag in her hands when she walked in, probably coffee and croissants from the corner cafe. I pictured her dropping the bag on the counter, spotting my note, then opening the closet. I knew the stages, first confusion, then annoyance, then denial. Right on schedule, my phone buzzed. "Brandon, what is this?" 2 minutes later, "You're being ridiculous. Call me back." Then, "You think leaving your shoes somewhere else proves a point? Grow up." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Every measure I'd taken that morning made her words smaller. She still thought this was about making a point. She had no idea the game had already changed. By noon, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Christine's calls stacked on each other, one after another, like she was trying to drown me with noise. I let them all go. Silence was my answer. At 12:47, I got a different kind of message. This one wasn't from her. It came from Selena Ward, a woman I barely knew. She worked in Christine's office. The text had no greeting, just a screenshot. A rooftop bar, string lights overhead, and Christine leaning in close to Adrian. Too close to mistake for casual. I stared at it until the phone dimmed. That was the first outside confirmation. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't just perfume and missing hours. She'd gone to that party out of spite, and she wanted it to sting. By 1 o'clock, I'd made a decision. I called Ezra Flynn, a courier I'd used once for work. Reliable, no small talk. I need you to deliver an envelope to my building's doorman, I told him. Inside the envelope, a signed separation agreement I'd printed weeks earlier but never thought I'd use, a printout of the toll receipt from 1:27 a.m., and my spare keys. Evidence and closure in one neat package. At 1:34, I texted Christine, "Pick up your envelope from Hector." Hector Salas had been our doorman for years. He didn't know what was inside, and he didn't ask. The call came 2 minutes later. Christine's voice was boiling. "Are you kidding me? An envelope with Hector? What is this? Some kind of stunt?" I answered once. Calm, steady. "Read page 2. She went quiet for a beat, then hissed, "You think this makes you smart? You think you get to humiliate me?" I ended the call without another word. The envelope wasn't about humiliating her. It was about control. She thought she could choose when the lights came on and off in our lives. Not anymore. Christine didn't sit quietly with the envelope. That wasn't her style. By the next morning, she'd switched tactics. She showed up at the gym I used to go to, waiting by the lockers like it was a coincidence. "Brandon, you can't be serious," she said, her arms folded across her chest. "Over one night? Over some party?" I tied my shoes, didn't look at her. "It wasn't just one night. You're blowing this up. You think you're punishing me, but you're embarrassing yourself." Her voice was tight, low enough so others wouldn't hear. I stood, met her eyes. "Embarrassment requires me to care what you think." Then I walked out. Later that afternoon, she tried again, this time at the coffee shop near my office. I was halfway through an Americano when she slid into the chair across from me, uninvited. "You won't wreck my life over a party," she said, leaning forward like she could bully me into believing her. I didn't flinch. "Then maybe you shouldn't have made it about that." Her smile thinned into something sharper. "If you want a war, Brandon, I can give you one. Your boss might want to know about your temper." That was the moment I knew she'd go for reputation. Not just mine, but anyone's who stood between her and control. So I went first. That evening I drafted an email to Lucinda Hale, my manager. Short, direct. I explained that I was in the middle of a separation, that things might get messy, and that I wanted her to hear it from me before any rumors reached her. I asked for 2 weeks of remote work. Lucinda replied within the hour. "Understood. Take care of what you need to. We'll adjust on our end." It was exactly what I needed. Acknowledgement without entanglement. I changed the passwords on every shared account, locked her out of the calendar, and turned off location sharing. Christine thought showing up unannounced gave her leverage. All it did was prove I'd been right to step out of reach. Rumors started trickling back within days. A couple we used to meet for dinner texted me out of nowhere. "We heard you just walked out." Man, if that's true, we're disappointed. No details, no questions. Just the seed she'd planted was taking root. Then the real break came. My phone lit up with a message from a name I didn't know. Jonas Keene. His text was simple. "You don't know me, but I was at Adrian's launch. You should see this." Attached were 2 photos. In the first, Christine and Adrian stood by the balcony doors, her hand resting flat on his chest. In the second, his arm was around her waist, both of them smiling like they hadn't a care in the world. Then came the video. 10 seconds long, grainy but clear enough. It showed Christine and Adrian on the balcony. She leaned in, and they kissed. Not an accident, not a polite goodbye. A kiss that said comfort, history, and choice. Jonas added one more line. They left together. I figured you should know. I watched the clip 3 times, each one slower than the last. It didn't gut me. It didn't even shock me. It just stripped away the last layer of doubt I'd been holding on to. I saved the files to a private legal folder I'd created, one Christine couldn't touch. I backed them up twice, external drive, cloud account. I wanted them beyond her reach, somewhere permanent. That night, for the first time since the silence began, I slept. Not long, not deep, but real. The kind where your chest finally rises and falls without clenching. She'd gone to her ex's party out of spite, and now I had the truth in a form even she couldn't rewrite. Christine's next play came 2 mornings later. A voicemail, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Brandon, I panicked, okay? I made a mistake. Can we just talk? Tell me what you want and I'll fix it." I listened once, then again. Not because I was swayed, but because I needed to be sure of what I heard. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry I hadn't played the role she counted on, the man who always stayed. I opened my laptop and drafted one short reply. From now on, communicate through counsel. That same day, I called an attorney, filed for divorce, and scheduled a supervised pickup for the last of my belongings. Victor Lowe, the estate manager at our building, agreed to oversee it. "Neutral ground," he said. "Clean and quick." That's what I wanted. Every thread tying me back to that apartment was cut, one after the other. Christine's response was predictable. She sent 3 long emails in a row, each one more frantic than the last. "We can get past this if you just stop being dramatic. You're throwing away years for nothing, Brandon. If you'd just meet me, you'd see this isn't the end." I didn't reply, not out of spite, out of discipline. Any answer would only feed her version of events. When Victor supervised my pickup, Christine wasn't even there. She left the apartment locked. Her absence was meant to sting. I loaded the last 2 boxes into my car and drove away without looking back. The separation wasn't emotional anymore. It was mechanical. Documents, signatures, dates. Step by step, the life she thought she controlled was slipping out of her hands, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. For the first time in years, I felt like the one holding the pen instead of being written over. 2 weeks later, I walked into the courthouse. No shouting matches, no drawn-out hearings, just a signature, a stamp, and a handshake from a quiet notary who barely looked up. That was the end of our marriage on paper. Afterward, I drove straight to my new place, a 1-bedroom near the river, the kind of place Christine would have called temporary or beneath us. To me, it felt permanent in the right way. I set my keys on the counter, glanced around at the bare walls, and felt the calm hit me like air after a storm. Malcolm, my co-worker, started dragging me on early morning runs along the river trail. At first, I hated the 6 a.m. alarm, but there was something about pounding the pavement with someone steady at your side that made me realize how much of my life had been eaten by her chaos. A week later, I mailed my old apartment keys back to the building office in a plain envelope. No note, no explanation. Just a set of metal teeth that no longer had any claim on me. Not long after, I ran into a neighbor from that building. She mentioned, almost casually, "Christine moved out last month, packed it all up in a hurry." I didn't ask where she went. I didn't need to know. That was the difference. For years, I'd been trained to monitor her every move, to piece together silences and half-truths. Now, her absence wasn't a puzzle to solve. It was freedom. One evening, a month after the courthouse, I opened the freezer to toss in a bag of ice, and for a moment, I just stared. Empty trays, frost at the corners. Then the memory hit. Christine's pearl earrings sitting on ice like they belonged there. I almost laughed. Back then, it felt like a riddle I couldn't solve. Now it just felt ridiculous. I shut the freezer and hung my new keys on the hook I'd drilled into the wall by the door. I thought about that first night, the silence that stretched through the walls like a warning. It had made my stomach twist, made me feel like something was missing, like I was the one at fault for hearing it. Now the silence was different. It wasn't her absence mocking me. It wasn't the weight of perfume in the air or the missing hours of a toll receipt. I sat on the couch and let the quiet settle in. No buzzing phone. No accusations waiting to explode. Just stillness. Christine had gone to her ex's party out of spite. She'd gambled on me folding the way I always had. But she'd walked back into a world where I no longer lived, And that was the one thing she never saw coming. She was speechless because she had no script for this version of me. No counter for a man who didn't argue, didn't beg, didn't stay. And that was the final shift. The silence wasn't a punishment anymore. It wasn't a question. It was an answer. Thank you for watching.